Time for another hot seat video. This one I think might be more interesting than the last one I did on the SEC. But there wasn't a lot to talk about, honestly, in the SEC when it comes to hot seats. Not the case in the Big Ten, though. Um, there are some coaches in the Big Ten who have been with their respective schools for a long, long time, especially in today's world of college football where it's kind of like, if you don't have some type of immediate success, you're fired and we're on to the next one, like a 3 or 4 year window. You don't see a lot of what we're about to talk about in college football anymore, but there are some coaches who have been around at these schools for a long, long time whose tenure could be coming to an end fairly soon. So just like normal, we're going to go through the Big Ten school by school. We'll talk about the coaches. Are they on the hot seat? Yes, no, maybe, whatever. We'll try to figure it out. Let's start with a couple that are definite no's, and that's because they were literally just hired and haven't even coached the game yet. Of course, I'm talking about Matt Rule at Wisconsin, and Matt Rule at Nebraska, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. Scott Frost fired, Paul Chryst fired. Wisconsin brings in Luke Fickell, Nebraska brings in Matt Rule. So this will be their first year there. So obviously, neither coach on the hot seat. Now, just like anytime we talk about this, I use the term hot seat, or when I talk about coach being fired, for the purposes of these types of videos, I'm talking about for on-field performance, for wins or losses, for record, for football things. We never know what's going to happen off the field with any coach ever at any time. So, not to say I expect Matt Rule or Luke Fickell to get into some sort of off-the-field issue that's going to result in them being fired. I don't. But what I mean, just as we go through this list, if I say I think someone's on the hot seat, I think this is their last year, it's for football reasons. We can't predict any type of scandal or anything like that happens off the field. So, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Matt Rule, Luke Fickell, no, not on the hot seat. They're in their first year. Let's scratch some other names off the list. These are just coaches that I don't think are going to get fired this year no matter what. I don't think they're on the hot seat. Let's start with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Now, it's always possible Jim Harbaugh quits and goes to the NFL. He does this song and dance with the NFL every offseason. And I still think that eventually he's going back to the NFL. I do think at some point Harbaugh's going back to the NFL. We don't know when that will be. I think it's impossible to guess or speculate because each of the last 2 off seasons, and even before that, he has flirted with going back to the NFL, going so far as to interview with teams. In fact, 2 signing days ago, not signing day this year, but signing day last year, on signing day, he was interviewing NFL teams. So he flirts back and forth with the NFL. So yes, that's always a possibility that he decides to go back to the NFL. But is he getting fired? Is he on the hot seat? No, he is not on the hot seat. He's not getting fired no matter what happens on the football field this year at the University of Michigan. You can scratch him right off your list. PJ Fleck at Minnesota, another one that I don't think is getting fired. The expectations are what they are at Minnesota, which means they're not very high. And as long as PJ Fleck, every 3 to 4 years, continues to put one of these, 9+ win teams on the field where he challenges to win the division, he's just not going to go anywhere. I mean, that's kind of, the best you can sort of hope for at Minnesota. Nowhere near the hot seat, PJ Fleck, Minnesota. Jeff Brom at Purdue. Here's somebody who's gotten himself off the hot seat. I believe I had Jeff Brom on the hot seat a year or 2 seasons ago. Well, of course, they won the division last year. Now, the Big Ten West was a complete disaster. It was horrible. It was garbage. Probably the worst the Big Ten West has been since we've had a Big Ten East and West was last year. But Purdue was the turd that floated to the top of the bowl. And they won the division. So I do not think that Brom at Purdue is on the hot seat anymore. Mike Locksley at Maryland. He's done okay there, and he's only been there a handful of years. I just don't think he's on the hot seat. I don't think he's in danger of getting fired this season, at least not for football-related reasons, right? Brett Bielema at Illinois. Breakout season last year for him. Had Illinois undefeated and ranked inside the top 15 at one point in the season. Now, they tailed off a little bit at the end and ended up not even winning the West, which was very surprising. If you'd asked me who was going to win the West halfway through the season, I think everybody would have said Illinois. I mean, they were undefeated, and everyone else was a disaster. Illinois slid backwards. Everyone else caught up. Purdue ends up winning the West. But anyway, he's not on the hot seat. Now, let's talk about a couple of lightning rods here. There are a lot of mixed feelings about these next 2 coaches on opposite ends of the spectrum, and some strong feelings. Let's start with James Franklin at Penn State. I'm a James Franklin fan. If I live to be 100 years old, I will respect James Franklin for what he did at Vanderbilt, winning 9+ games or whatever. And it's not like he's been a total failure at Penn State. Now, I get it. He struck lightning early on there, beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten. This was back in 2016. And so since then, anything short of that has felt disappointing. I get it. I get it. Yeah, in your Penn State, you should not. I'm not asking Penn State to settle for being the second or third best team in the Big Ten. That's not what I'm asking. I get it. Penn State has a lot of history. They're a great program. They're a great program now. So I understand that where Penn State has finished the last few years is not acceptable for the fans. I get it. And that's a good thing. That the fans feel that way. Penn State, I believe, is a team whose fans should expect playoff type seasons. So I get it. But I don't think James Franklin's on the hot seat. I think James Franklin has done okay at Penn State. He happens to be there during a time when Ohio State and Michigan, especially the last couple of years in Michigan's case, are just at the pinnacle of college football. And you say, well, if Michigan did it, how come Penn State can't do it? Fair question. That's a fair question. I think this year coming up is probably James Franklin's best opportunity since joining Penn State to make the college football playoffs. Not because Michigan is going to fall off or Ohio State's going to be bad. I expect both those teams to be good again. But I think Penn State's going to be a really, really good team. They bring back a ton from a loaded team last year. A huge improvement at quarterback with Drew Allar over Sean Clifford. Two of the best running backs in the country, maybe the best running back tandem in the country. Michigan's got an argument for that too, but an All-American on defense. They just return a ton everywhere. And you kind of look at it and you go, if they're not going to get over the hump this year and win the Big Ten and maybe make the playoff, when will they? Well, when will they will be then next year. Because listen, as frustrating as it's been for the Penn State, man, the minute we go to a 12-team playoff, Penn State's a lock for a playoff almost every single year on the current trajectory they're on right now. They're absolutely loaded. I feel like a lot of people give Penn State kind of the Texas treatment. And again, I kind of understand. Penn State is a big-time program that gets talked about a lot. So whenever they fall short of the playoffs or winning their conference, it's easy for people to point at that and go, oh, man, on the offseason, we heard all about that, and here they are again not doing it. Texas has been kind of that same way, right? So it's kind of like fatigue sets in for fans sometimes. You feel like you hear the same things about Penn State over and over. I really believe this is going to be Penn State's best team in a long time. If Drew Allar ends up being what most people think he will be, which is a great quarterback, a probable first-round draft pick in a couple of years, and a huge improvement over what they had before in Sean Clifford. So I do not have James Franklin on my hot seat, but a lot of people do. I hear from people all the time that say James Franklin's overrated, Penn State should fire him, Penn State should move on. I couldn't disagree more. I think James Franklin's done an okay job there. Yes, he has fell short of expectations a couple of times, but that's because of Ohio State and Michigan more than it is anything Penn State's been doing wrong. So I wouldn't have James Franklin and Penn State on this list. The other one that you hear people talking about in the Big Ten that it's funny, I will admit, but I have to just shake my head, is RyAn DaY. RyAn DaY is not getting fired for going 11-1, ever. Write it down. I know Ohio State fans especially, but even some Michigan fans too, think that the Ohio State-Michigan game is the most important sporting event on planet Earth every single year, and nothing else matters. And it doesn't matter if we go, if we go the next 5 years and lose one game a year all 5 years, but that one game's to Michigan, I want the coach fired. That's just never going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Ohio State and RyAn DaY can continue to go 11-1 year after year after year after year after year and losing Michigan at the end. RyAn DaY won't get fired for that. It's just not going to happen. I understand you don't want to lose to Michigan and it's unacceptable. I get it. I completely get that. But the idea that RyAn DaY would be fired for going 11-1 with that one loss being to Michigan is insane. So let's just forget about that right now, okay? Well, he hadn't won a national championship, woo. Well, only one coach can do that a year. There's only, 4 active coaches who have a national title? Are you going to fire 128 coaches a year, 129, 130 coaches a year because they either didn't win a national title or never have? I don't blame Ohio State fans for being frustrated. They're one of the most talented teams in the country. RyAn Day's had a couple of opportunities in the playoffs, come up short both times. It is extremely difficult to make a 4-team playoff. I feel like fans of elite level teams, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, however long you want to make that list or short. I feel like fans of those teams, and I'll include myself, I have to remind myself of this sometimes too, so I'll throw myself in the pile here. I think we sometimes forget how hard it is in a league with 133 teams to make a 4-team playoff. That's insane. It is insanely hard. Okay? And the more one team makes the playoffs, the harder it gets for those particular fans, I think, to remember that. Alabama is probably the biggest example of this, right? Because they've made the playoffs more than anyone else. If you just sit down and think about it, the NFL's got 32 teams. How many make the playoffs? 12, 14, something like that? That's like 35% of the teams. The same thing in baseball, same thing in the NBA. College football, about 2.5% of the teams make the playoffs. 133 teams, 4 play. It is extremely hard to make a 4-team playoff. RyAn Day's not getting fired for not winning a national title, and he's not getting fired for losing to Michigan. That is just not going to happen. Now, I love laughing at RyAn Day as a giant crybaby who makes excuses about everything. And really, if we're being honest, RyAn Day hasn't done a single thing to elevate Ohio State football. Literally nothing. Now, he came into a difficult situation if the goal was to elevate the football program, because when he came in, Ohio State was on top of the world. I mean, they were coming off the Urban Meyer run, right? It's a lot easier to inherit a 4-win dumpster fire and show improvement, right? You can win 6 games. You can go 6-6, and that's an improvement over what you inherited if you inherited a 4-win team. You come in and you inherit a team that is averaging 1 loss a year for the last decade. There's nothing you can do to improve that short of going undefeated every single year that you're there, right? So it's different expectations based on when you come in. So that being said, yeah, RyAn Day hasn't done anything to elevate Ohio State. In fact, you can make the argument that he has brought them down a peg, right? Because Ohio State was beating Michigan on a regular basis like a drum year in and year out, year after year after year. RyAn Day has now lost to them 2 years in a row. However, RyAn Day has also made the playoffs twice, right? Again, think about how hard it is to make a 4-team playoff. I think RyAn Day is a clown. I think he's fun to laugh at. His press conferences are like comedy hour, okay? With the excuses and the crying. I completely get the Jim Harbaugh comment about RyAn Day being born on third base and thinking he hit a triple. I get all of that is true. All of that is true. RyAn Day ain't getting fired for going 11-1 and losing to Michigan. It's not happening. RyAn Day's not getting fired for going 11-2 where he loses to Michigan and then loses in a first-round playoff game. Not when there's a 4-team playoff. Now, all that's coming to an end after this year. Now, once we get into a 12-team playoff, I think some of this stuff is going to change for some of these higher-level teams. I think your teams like Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, Bama, Michigan, whatever, they will reach a point where making a 12-team playoff and losing the first game is unacceptable. Now that's a different conversation. But as long as we're stuck in a situation where we've got 4 playoff teams, no one is getting fired because they lost a playoff game. It's not happening. It's just not happening. So take RyAn Day off the list, okay? So Nebraska, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Penn State. None of those coaches are getting fired. Purdue, not getting fired. Maryland, not getting fired. Illinois, not getting fired. Ohio State, not getting fired. Who does that leave? Well, that leaves Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. I'm not going to get on here and make a bunch of Northwestern jokes. What would be the point? I can think of exactly one Northwestern fan off the top of my head, and he's a brain-dead Twitter dribbler that, you have to read his tweets like 6 times before they make any sense at all. And again, why punch down? I'm not taking candy from that baby. But the point is, Pat Fitzgerald may have worn out his welcome at Northwestern. Now, the issue is, well, there's a couple of issues. One, he's one of these coaches I was talking about at the beginning. He's been there forever and a day. He's been there forever and a day. That's how long he's been. How long has he been there? 17 years. Guy's been there 17 years. Before that, he played at Northwestern. So they love him. I get it. 52% winning percentage over a 17-year period. I mean, you're basically a 6-6 coach for your career. I just don't think that's acceptable for 17 years. I'm sorry. I know it's Northwestern, and they're never going to be able to recruit, and academic restrictions, and look where they're at geographically, and they don't have a lot of history. I get all that. Okay? But 17 years, it may be time to move on from Pat Fitzgerald. Maybe even not so much because he's a terrible coach. Maybe we find out that, 500 over a 17-year period is about what you can expect at Northwestern. But eventually, don't you just need some new blood, some new ideas, inject just some newness into the program? I mean, it's just starting to feel a little stale at Northwestern after 17 years. Mel Tucker at Michigan State. Now, he's only been there 3 years, and he had one great year. That's not the problem. The problem is the other two. It's not been good. 18-14. That's his record. Now, keep in mind, he was like 10-2 or 11-2 just 2 seasons ago. You know how bad you have to be the other 2 years? Again, his overall record is 18-14. That's in 3 seasons, and that includes the 11-2 season. Terrible. And they're paying him $9.5 million a year. Again, I'm a Mel Tucker fan, okay? I like Mel Tucker. I thought he was a great defensive coordinator under Kirby Smart at Georgia. Prior to that, he was a great defensive backs coach at Bama for a while. He's a great coach. I like him a lot. He failed miserably at Colorado State, was it? He was there for 1 year. It was terrible. And then for some reason, Michigan State not only hired him, it gave him $9.5 million. They had the one good year with Kenneth Walker, the running back that he got out of the transfer portal. Last year, they were like dead last in the country in running the ball. So I don't know. It's just not looking good. And none of their losses are close either. Like, it's not like Michigan State was bad last year. You remember when a couple of years ago when Nebraska was 4-8 or 5-7, whatever they were, 3-9, I believe, actually. But like 8 of their 9 losses were by 7 points or less, and that's all you kept hearing. Well, yeah, they lost 9 games, but they were close losses. No, not the case with Michigan State. They got blown out the majority of the time. $9.5 million. Now his buyout, I'm sure, is through the roof, and that may be a problem. But I have to put Mel Tucker on the hot seat. Been there 3 years. 2 were an utter failure. And you're paying him a king's ransom. I'm sorry. When you get paid $9.5 million a year, types of seasons like last year are unacceptable. It is what it is. I like Mel Tucker. Got to put him on the hot seat. Speaking of somebody that may have overstayed their welcome, Tom Allen at Indiana. Do you know he's been there 7 years? I don't know why that was a surprise to me, but it was. He's been there 7 years. You know what his record is? 30-40. Look, there ain't a college football program in the country whose bare minimum expectations should be any less than bowl eligibility, which is 6-6. So if you've been somewhere 7 years and your record is 30-40, it might not be working out for you. It might be time to move on, Indiana, from Tom Allen. $4 million a year for a losing record over 7 years, unacceptable. What about these last two? Greg Schiano at Rutgers. It worked when he was there the first time. It's not working now. I'm not sure why. I'm going to be honest. I don't pay a ton of attention to Rutgers football. I did think this was a good hire for Rutgers when they made it from a football perspective, based solely on the fact that he was successful there before where no one else really has been able to. I don't know if it's a situation where the game has changed too much since he was there last time. I don't know if it's a situation where other coaches in the Big Ten have figured out what he's doing and it's not successful anymore. I don't know if it's a talent issue. I don't know what it is, but it's just not working. The last 2 years, 5-8 and 4-8. That's pitiful. Again, I know it's Rutgers, okay? The bare minimum when it comes to expectations should be bowl eligibility. You can't even get to 6 wins. I think they did make a bowl game 2 years ago when they were 5-8, but that's because somebody backed out of a game or something and they got in based off of some type of academic rating, whatever. He's been at Rutgers for a grand total, the first time and now, 14 years. And even though he had some success when he was there the first time, you know what his overall record is at Rutgers? Now 14 years covers 2 different coaching periods. He was there the first time, he left, went to the NFL, now he's come back. But a total of 14 years there, this surprised me. 80 and 89. Again, a losing record over a 14-year period. You just cannot justify that. Greg Schiano on the hot seat at Rutgers. And last, Kirk Ferentz. Another one of these Big Ten dinosaurs. What is it with the Big Ten? You got Northwestern's kept this guy around for 17 years. Nothing to show for it. Tom Allen at Indiana, 7 years, losing record. Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, 24 years he's been there. 24. Now, in his defense, at least he has a winning record. He's won 60% of his games. I think Iowa is well known of a team enough nationally. You all know what the issues are there. It's offensive, right? Their offense is offensive. In fact, in that it offends me. It's that bad. It's terrible. They average like 14, 15 points a game offensive, something like that. He's hired his son as the offensive coordinator, which is never a good idea under any circumstances, period, bar none. Now, the offense is horrible. He don't want to fire the offensive coordinator because it's his son, so the university has to come in and lay down all these weird rules. Well, okay, if you don't average this many points per game, and I'm not making this up. This is in the contract. This is in the offensive coordinator's contract now. If they don't average at least 24 points a game, which 24, you know how bad that is? 24 points a game is going to put you like 100th nationally. If you don't average at least 24 points a game, then you only make this amount of money. If you average over that, then you'll make more money. Great. Fire this guy. But you never should have hired him. So anyway, I think Kirk Ferentz is on the hot seat. Iowa is a team in desperate need of new blood. So some energy or something needs to be injected into that program. They are the most boring team in the country to watch. How many games do they have that are just double-digit games? 9-3, 6-3, 7-5. Iowa football is unwatchable. Unwatchable. And in today's age, where TV dollars are so important, I don't understand how Iowa... If you're watching Iowa football, you've got to be just the world's biggest Iowa fan. Nobody outside of that is watching. It's that bad. Kirk Ferentz has been here 24 years. Overstayed his welcome, in my opinion. College football is moving into a new age. TV money and networks are driving the bus. Expanding to a 12-team playoff. All types of conference realignment and stuff like that going on. Iowa needs to out with the old, in with the new. Get rid of Kirk Ferentz. Bring in a young, new, innovative offensive mind to take that program over and see what you can do going forward. I believe that Iowa is a program that under a 12-team playoff model could make a playoff here and there, but not with the offense they currently have, and maybe not with Kirk Ferentz. It may be time to go a different direction. I have Kirk Ferentz on my hot seat as well. There you go. Big Ten hot seat for the offseason heading into the 2023 season. I've done the SEC version of this video. If you're interested in that, you can click back a few videos and check it out. Anyway, have a great day.